Hey there, Isolation Nation. Are you getting hungry? Are you looking for a great snack? Make sure to wash your hands. Get out all your ingredients. Turn on that oven and let's get ready to bake. I've got an audience. How's Mama doing? Is she doing good? I already screwed up this recipe. Hey everyone, and welcome to my kitchen in the very first episode of Stay Home and Cook. My name's Sharla Brown, and by no means am I a chef, but I do like to get in the kitchen and bake and cook, and especially during times of self-isolation, during this COVID-19 pandemic, when most of us are at home most of the day and trying to think of things that we can do that are fun, that are entertaining, and things that are positive that can keep our minds busy. And so we thought it might be fun to be able to try some new recipes with you so that you can learn and maybe try some things out as well at home. These are great recipes that you can do at home with your family. And I think a lot of us worry about the homeschooling and the kids still learning, but there's something to be said about skills and life skills that we can develop as well. That's one of the things that I've really appreciated learning as a kid and spending time in the kitchen with my grandma and with my mom, was really learning cooking and baking skills and to be able to do that. So these cookies are called banana chocolate chip cookies, but I also call them my I love you cookies or my I'm sorry cookies, which during isolation, we're in close quarters with our family, and sometimes, well, we can get on each other's nerves. Our tempers can get short. We can say things we don't mean. All kinds of crazy stuff in isolation where, just sometimes that happens. But what I find that with my significant other, that if that happens, I just can bake a batch of I love you cookies, and when he smells them, he knows that I'm sorry, and he can't stay angry at me because these are his favorite cookies in the world. So if you need a great recipe to pull out of your back pocket to be able to say I love you or to say I'm sorry, this is a perfect recipe for that. And who doesn't like chocolate chip cookies? These ones have a bit of a spin. So some people might have bananas at home that look a little like this. These ones aren't so bad yet, but as they start turning and they've seen a better day and that maybe they were destined for banana bread. Sometimes we make banana muffins, but I like making banana cookies. And so I'm gonna share with you my secret recipe, which is definitely a fan favorite. My family loves it, my friends love it, and I'm gonna actually share that recipe with you today. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about all the things that you're gonna need to make it, which is a pretty simple recipe, and a lot of it, if you do already bake at home, you might have at home. So you need a cup of butter, you need 1 cup of brown sugar, 2 eggs, a teaspoon of vanilla, 3 medium mashed ripe bananas, 3 cups of flour, 2 heaping teaspoons of baking powder, a half teaspoon of baking soda, 2 heaping teaspoons of cinnamon, 2 cups of semi-sweet or milk chocolate chips, and 1.5 cups of chopped nuts. Those can be walnuts, pecans, almonds, whatever you like. And if you like coconut, you can add in a half cup of flaked coconut. What I love about this recipe is you can really change that up. If you don't want to use chocolate chips, maybe you want to put raisins or cranberries in it. Maybe you want to try different nuts or different things that's in there. This is a pretty forgiving recipe. As for baking, which is a science, as we all know, and it's a little tricky that you got to make sure things are measured out, that you can play with the ingredients a little bit in terms of what you like to eat with bananas. And I like to pre-measure everything beforehand, and why I do that is A, it's easier to just throw things together, but I guess I've run into problems more times than once where I started doing a recipe, you get halfway through and you realize you're missing an ingredient or you don't have it. And with baking, it's hard to leave things out. If you don't have baking powder or baking soda or the things like that, the leavening agents that it calls for, then you get to be in big trouble. So it's kind of good if you can pre-measure everything and just make sure that all your ingredients are there and that you have them. Okay, so I'm gonna start by mixing all of the wet ingredients together, and I'm gonna do that right here in the KitchenAid bowl. Now, you don't necessarily need a KitchenAid, you don't need anything fancy to make these cookies. You can do it the old school way. You can just bring out a bowl and a mixing spoon, or if you have a mix master, you can do it that way. So we're gonna start with our wet ingredients, which is first by softening the butter. So it's a cup of butter, and I just kind of melted it a little bit in the microwave, so it was just easier to measure and to put out. So you just want to make sure that it's softened, and if you don't want to use butter, you can also use margarine. That works as well. I tend to be a butter person and using kind of something a little bit more natural. Then the next thing you're gonna want to put in is your brown sugar. So that's also a cup of brown sugar that I measured out beforehand. So we've got our butter, we've got our brown sugar, and our beaten eggs. So that's 2 beaten eggs that I just kind of beat beforehand, beat them just with a fork so that they're already kind of pre-mixed up. I'm gonna dump that in there. And our mashed bananas. So this was 3 bananas, and I just mashed them with a fork so that they're already kind of squished up and easier to mix. And a tip for your bananas as well, that if you have bananas that's going bad at home, but you're not wanting to make cookies right away, or you're not wanting to make banana bread, is just throw them in the freezer just as they are. So if you take the bananas just like this, throw them in the freezer. Afterwards, you just throw them in the sink to let them unthaw, snip off an end, dump it right in the mix, and they're a lot easier to mush as well. And you can use your bananas at any time for banana bread, banana cookies, banana muffins, whatever. So great little tip for you. So this is a teaspoon of vanilla, and I'm going to mix these to start with. Now they say in a separate bowl to mix all your dry ingredients together, then mix your wet ingredients with your dry ingredients. I've made this recipe 100 times. I know that I can just throw everything in a bowl and it's gonna be just fine. So I'm going to just put all my dry ingredients in there. So you got 3 cups of flour. Now I just used all-purpose flour, but you can play with different kinds of flours. And this recipe actually called for 1.5 cups of all-purpose and 1.5 cups of spelt flour. I've never used spelt flour before, but I'm sure that if there's different flours out there, if you want to try making these cookies gluten-free, that you could play around with it, and I'm sure that it might work out. You might have to play with the ratios, but it's something that you can definitely try. Then we have our baking powder and baking soda. And like I said, there's some things in baking that you just can't leave out. And if you say, oh, you know, it only called for a half teaspoon of baking soda, it probably doesn't need it. Those are the things that are your leavening agents. So it's what makes the cookies big and fluffy. And these cookies actually, you'll see when they're cooked and done, they look more like muffin tops than they do cookies, and they're super delicious. So make sure that you have all that. So we have 2 tablespoons of baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. So I've pre-measured those out, and those are already in there. And then for some great flavor, comfort, cinnamon, 2 heaping teaspoons. And you throw that in there. If you are using a mix master and you threw your flour on top, don't turn it on high because you're gonna be wearing your flour. So just make sure you put it on slow and low to mix up, and that way it will, as it mixes, then I can turn it a little higher to be able to mix it a little more thorough. So what I'm gonna do is just give it a quick scrape down so that all the ingredients are thoroughly mixed together, because you always get a little flour and stuff that sticks to the side of the bowl. And it mixes up so you get a good idea of what that batter is looking like. I'll mix it one more time. And then comes the fun part of adding in whatever you want to go with your banana cookies. So for me, I'm using chopped pecans, I'm using shredded coconut, and I'm using milk chocolate chips. But you can definitely have fun with this and change it up, as I mentioned before. If you want to put raisins in it instead of chocolate chips, or cranberries, if you want to use different types of nuts like walnuts or almonds or whatever that you have, that you can use that instead, or maybe you don't want any nuts at all and you want them nut-free. And then I added coconut, which you can do that. So we have 2 cups of chocolate chips, I have a cup of nuts, and I have a cup of coconut. So you can play with those and change them up as you would like to. But these tend to make for our favorite cookie here. And I'm just gonna turn it on to mix it up again. The one thing you'll wanna make sure you're doing if you're using a KitchenAid is just to lock it. When you put in a lot of ingredients, then it just wants to kind of bounce around and stuff like that as you're mixing it. So it just keeps it stable and sitting on your counter rather than your cookies all winding up on the floor. All right, so I think that is well mixed. I'm gonna just scrape off the spatula here. Yeah, and this kind of shows you what the batter looks like afterwards, which smells wonderful, smells like banana, and I can't wait to bake it. So I preheated the oven at 350 degrees. I turned that on even before I got started. So it's already hot and ready to go, and that you can scoop up your cookies. I have an actual cookie scooper. You don't need a fancy cookie scooper. You can use a tablespoon or a teaspoon depending on how big you want your cookies. But like I said, these work kind of best looking. They look like muffin tops. You can make them smaller if you want, but we usually do a whole scoop. And I'm using baking stones, which don't look very nice, but that's the whole point of a baking stone, is the more you use it, the more seasoned that stone gets, and the better that it even cooks. And so those are my favorite pans to cook cookies on, but you can use any baking sheet that you want. So as I mentioned, once these bake, they look a lot like a muffin top. And during COVID-19, I'm sure many of us are thinking that we're gonna wind up with this muffin top at the end. We have a lot of extra time to be baking, to be cooking, to be eating a lot of different snacks. So, making sure you're out and getting walks and staying healthy and exercising and stuff as well is really important. But yeah, I always would joke about that, is that, COVID-19, even though the virus was discovered in 2019, hence why it's called COVID-19, it's almost like that freshman 10. To me, I think it's the average amount of weight that we're all gonna gain during this isolation time. But, like I said, you can make these healthier if you want to. There's different ways you can change it out, and everything's in moderation. It's just a fun way to be able to do some fun activities that you can do with your family during isolation, and also learn some just different skills and recipes. So I'm gonna throw these in the oven, and they're gonna bake for about 15 to 20 minutes. And I say 15 to 20 because it all depends on your oven. So I'm gonna set mine, because I know mine in here usually take about 16 minutes. So I'm gonna set it to that, and then just watch and see, open the door when the timer goes off, and just check if they're browned nicely. And if they look like that, then they're ready to take out of the oven and enjoy. And so we're gonna try those shortly. Okay, so time is up, and are you ready for some cookies? These turned out amazing. And it smells like heaven in here. I'm gonna pull these ones over so you can get a better look of them. Our timer is off, and this is our finished result. I like to take them off. I'd probably let them cool a little bit, but you can still take them off, and I put them on baking trays, but you don't need to. You can put them on your countertop. You can leave them just here to cool and enjoy. So here we have it, our final product, our fresh baked banana chocolate chip cookies. Such a fun and fast recipe to make, something that you can do with your family and something that you can enjoy doing during isolation. I know that this is a challenging time for all of us, but we need to find these fun activities that we can do together as our families in our homes that keep us safe and well and healthy and still having some fun. So during these challenging times, I want to leave you with one final thought by the cookie guru himself, the one and only Cookie Monster, who said, "Today I will live in the moment unless it's unpleasant, in which case I will enjoy a cookie." So we hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we hope you tune in next time for more on Stay Home and Cook. My Cookie Monster.